All right, so let's move on to some more foolishness.
Yes.
John Jones and Israel had like back and forth battles. Apparently, this started with Israel in an interview saying that he already beat one goat, which referencing Anderson Silva, and then he's like, I'm going to be hunting for goats in reference to John Jones. John Jones got upset, got caught wind of it, got upset, started like tweeting stuff back. Like he said something about like he'd beat him in 3 rounds and make him call him daddy. And then he tried to he was insulting Israel after that fight, saying like, oh, you got almost beat up by a stubby wrestler. And then later he's like, no disrespect to Kelvin Gastelum.
Too late.
Yeah, and there's back and forth. And then he was on the MMA Hour with Luke Thomas, and he's like, because he didn't want to, because people asked him that night, Saturday night, about John Jones. He's like, I don't want to talk about him. This is about me and Kelvin, and what we just did, and so he didn't answer anything. But when he started doing interviews, and he was on that talking to Luke Thomas, he was like, he's like that guy's a C word, and he's like, he wishes he could be like me. I'm everything he's not. And he's like, so what do you take out of all this, and also a potential fight with John Jones?
Well, before we start talking about a potential fight with John Jones, how about Israel Adesanya be the undisputed middleweight champion first? And I think that's what we need to do. We need to pump the brakes on this. It is fun that they are going back and forth on Twitter. That's cute and all. And there is some backstory to that. Israel Adesanya has been brought into camps before he was in the UFC. He was brought in camps to emulate John Jones. There's some footage, I think. In fact, I think you DM'd me this. I believe it was from Brett Okamoto of ESPN, where he took a trip down to South Florida to watch Rumble Johnson preparing for what was supposed to be the John Jones fight. They brought in Israel Adesanya there. I think he was brought in also in preparation for Vitor Belfort to fight John Jones. So he has a familiarity with how Jones moves. They have similar dimensions. So there are some things that overlap, but Adesanya is not the undisputed middleweight champion. So let's not talk about super fights until he's actually in that position to where a super fight makes sense. It's fun and all. Hey, I'll go to the UFC 3 game and I'll play that combination. That sounds like a great time. But in the meantime, let's not count all of our chickens before they hatch.
Yeah, speaking of the UFC game, how many people are using Israel Adesanya after Saturday night's fight playing on Sunday?
Yeah, if you just started using Israel Adesanya's character after Saturday, you've been missing out, because the moment they updated that game and put him on there, that was one of my regular go-tos right there.
Yeah. So yeah, with the John, even if he beats Robert Whittaker, he's still not that fight should not happen.
Right. There's Jacare. There's Yoel Romero. Weidman. There's a lot of challenges facing him at middleweight. There, Jack Hermanson, if he beats Jacare in Florida coming up in, was that a month or so, or a couple of weeks or whatever, that makes all the sense in the world for Hermanson to be in this conversation. So we have to pump the brakes. Let's not start talking all this super fight nonsense first. Let these fights happen and we'll figure it out from there. For all we know, John Jones could be headed to heavyweight before long, and then that fight just makes absolutely zero sense, even less sense than it makes now.
I mean, my take it, and Israel was saying like a similar thing in where he's like, look, I need to win the title first, and then I need to defend it a few times, and then I'll be ready. He does. I mean, just from a physical standpoint, and we'll talk about this with the Dustin Poirier, Max Holloway thing. He physically cannot fight John Jones right now. You know what I mean? Like, he's not like a small guy. Obviously, he was bigger than Kelvin Gastelum, but he's not a big middleweight. There's a ton of middleweights bigger than Israel Adesanya, and for him to, let's say, go up to light heavyweight and fight John Jones, he'd just be, from a physical and strength perspective, be outmatched. So I think he needs years more of experience, building his body up stronger.
Yeah, time in the weight room.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
that's just not going to happen. Like it's one thing if we're talking about Luke Rockhold or Yoel Romero
Yeah.
or Chris Weidman, the guys who are known as the kind of oversized middleweights that
Mm.
have these big cuts, then that makes sense. Like Luke Rockhold is going up to 205 coming up in a few months here, and that makes all the sense in the world. Yoel Romero has been teasing that for quite some time. Chris Weidman was just about this close to signing to Bellator as a light heavyweight fighter years ago. Those things make sense. But Israel Adesanya is still a pretty lanky guy without a lot of. Like, John Jones may appear to be very skinny when you watch him on TV. He does still have kind of skinny
Chicken
looking,
legs, chicken
yeah,
legs.
undefined chicken legs. Like he still has that, but that man's upper body is jacked. And I've
And,
been in the same room with him many occasions, and that is a huge person right there.
and he got
Israel
bigger.
Adesanya, yeah, he's gotten bigger. He is a very muscular, strong guy. Israel Adesanya is nowhere near him from a physicality standpoint, and much less. And we're not even talking about the experience level. We're not even talking about skill set as a fighter.
Yeah.
We're not even talking about his worthiness of fighting John Jones in a super fight. Just on a pure physicality standpoint, there is no match.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
just doesn't make
Yeah.
sense.
2 3 years maybe. We'll see. I mean, yeah. I took a screen capture. So Ariel Helwani interviewed Israel, and then he had a quote from the interview. He said, this is Israel saying, John Jones, he literally reminds me of what I hated most in life, and that's bullies. And then John Jones went on to the Instagram of Ariel Helwani, who had posted this picture of Israel and this quote. And he wrote, "This kid's seriously delusional. Now I represent all the bullies of the world, and I'm spending my free time studying this kid's personality for tips. He also could beat me right now, but he's still waiting so he can kick my ass first." And then he put a thumbs up. And then Style Bunder wrote back, "From Twitter to IG, you cover your tracks well. You really want to be liked, don't you? Okay, you do you, boo boo."
Man, like really, I do love the personality clash between those two because they do kind of represent the antithesis of one another.
Yeah.
John Jones is, while he is, I'll give him this. He is a very polite person when speaking to him in a professional capacity. He's a very polite person. He'll shake your hand. He'll look you in the eye, and he'll give you very diplomatic answers. But you get the sense he's really not a nice person. Adesanya is kind of the opposite of that. Adesanya will say the crazy thing on the mic, but you can tell he's really like a nice guy.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so to see that sort of clash is really interesting. But yeah, man, this we should not be talking about this fight as if
No.
it is a reality that we should be experiencing anytime
Yeah.
soon. I'm okay with this fight never happening. I'm totally okay with that. A lot of things have to happen in order for this fight to make sense. And quite frankly, I don't see half of those things coming to fruition for this fight to make any sense in the future.
Yeah, this is something you have to revisit in a year, 2 years, to see where Israel stands at that point.
Exactly. And we got to also see where John Jones stands.
Yeah,
Like I said, this man could be headed to heavyweight. How much sense will that make then?
yeah.
Israel Adesanya is not going to fight at heavyweight. I'll tell you that
No,
much.
no,
At
no.
least not right now.